Welcome to our little storytelling session. If you've watched some of our stories before, I'm sure you've enjoyed them. If you haven't, welcome. If you like what you see, please press subscribe and tell us if you like it. Press the like button, and if you ring the bell, you'll get a reminder of whenever we post a new story. There's plenty of them coming up regularly from different places all around the world. Today, I'd like to tell you a story about the time we crossed from Uganda into Zaire to see the mountain gorillas. We'd just come down from Mount Kilimanjaro, been through Kenya, Mombasa, and up to Nairobi, where we picked up a young chap, young friend of mine who was working for us at the time, who'd come over to Africa to join us for a Christmas holiday. We caught the bus up to Kampala and went to the youth hostel. In those days, there was no flashpacking around, there was no Wi-Fi, there was nothing like that you could really book ahead in advance unless you were doing it through an agency. You just sort of turned up in a place and found where you wanted to stay. And we'd had word that the youth hostel was not bad, so we went along there. When we got there, the lady said to us, "You know beds?" We said, "Yes, we know beds." They said, "We don't have any." "Oh, what do you mean you don't have any?" They said, "We don't have any beds." What she meant was that they had places, rooms you could stay in, but they literally did not have any beds. Because this was not too long after Edi Amin had been in power, and the country had really not got back onto its feet at all. So we went into town, we booked into the place, we went into town, and to change some money. Now, hyperinflation was rampant, or inflation was rampant in Uganda at that time. So when you changed money, they gave you a shopping bag full of notes to take away with you. Brendan changed $100, Fiona and I changed $160 between us, and literally we had a shopping bag full of money like this, I kid you not, with bricks of notes in there to carry around. This was $160. And everybody walking around the town, you go to the markets and people were carrying these shopping bags full of notes. You knew what they were because they all had very distinctive red and yellow and black markings on them, right? They were issued by the bank. So we caught a bus back to the youth hostel, and catching buses in those days in Uganda was a bit of an experience in itself because they were very, very old, they were very run down and very rusty. So you had to be careful where you were walking on the floor, because if you stepped in the wrong place, you'd go straight through the floor. If you looked down, you could see the ground disappearing underneath you. And the bus conductors used to carry backpacks to put the bus fares in. That's how much money you had to carry. I think that the largest note at the time was something like 100, whatever they are in the local money, I can't remember. And I think that there was something like 5,000 to the Australian dollar. So you used to get 50 notes for every Australian dollar that you changed. We went back to the youth hostel. We had the option of where to stay there. The lady said, "We don't have beds, but you can sleep on the pool table if you'd like to, or if you have a tent, you can camp outside in the grounds," which is what we chose to do. We had a little two-man tent between us that Fiona and I had been carrying around. So the three of us at night time squeezed into this little two-man tent, about as high as a normal table that you'd sit out to have dinner. And Brendan was over 6 feet tall, so it was a pretty tight fit. About 1 o'clock in the morning, we heard this screaming, this woman's voice, screaming at the top of her lungs. Didn't know what was happening, and it didn't sound too far away, but it was screaming, didn't stop until we heard a gunshot. Bang! No more screaming. That was it, full stop. Now, we don't know what happened. I don't want to know what happened, but I said to the guys, I'm not getting out of the tent tonight, whether I want to go to the toilet or not. I'm staying exactly where I am. The next day, we caught a public bus down to the border. There was no tourist buses in those days. Everything was by public transport, at least in that part of the world. It was all by public transport. And we booked into this tiny little place. It was a beautiful little spot, almost like an old English cottage with little doilies on the table and beautifully set out with a lovely couple running the place. And it was Christmas Eve. The next day was Christmas Day. Now, Christmas Day, we couldn't go up to see the guerillas. It was closed. We couldn't cross. I think the border was closed. But Christmas Day, we woke up in the morning, had breakfast, and we could hear all these bells ringing, all through the mountains, echoing through the mountains. So we said, let's go and find out what they are. So we wandered, followed the sound of the bells up to the top of this mountain to this church. There's this church up there. Well, it's Christmas Day. You know, I'm not religious, but let's go to church. So we sat on the back of the church, and the preacher introduced us, asked us to stand up, asked us what our names were. Would we please explain where we're from and why we're here and why we're traveling around Uganda, which we did. And then he apologized, and he said, I'm sorry, I must conduct the service in the local language because most people here do not speak English. Which sort of made me wonder why he asked us to explain where we were from, because we could only speak English. Maybe there was a few who understood us, I don't know. They don't have a collection to collect money for the church in that part of the world, or at least in those days they didn't. At the end of the service, what they did was that people brought different things along that they could auction. So there was little bits of furniture, there was fruit and vegetables and things, and one person had brought along this really bright striped sports coat. Right? And I thought, oh, that'd be a bit of fun. It was quite cold up in the mountains there. And I thought that'd be a bit of fun to have. So I got into a bidding war with one of the chaps for this coat, sports coat. And in the end I won, which I was always going to do, because there's not an awful lot of money that people in Rwanda have. But after I'd won the coat and paid the money to the church, I walked over to him and gave the coat to the man who was bidding against. I said, here, it's yours. You obviously wanted it very much, so you keep it. And he was so appreciative. He invited us back to his place for lunch. Not everybody likes the taste of goat because it has a very distinctive smell about it. But when it's stewed up with a few potatoes, I don't normally mind it, but this had to be the toughest piece of meat I have ever tasted in my life. I don't think you could have cut it with an axe, but you would suspect that you'd be able to eat the potatoes. You'd suspect. But these potatoes were the most disgusting things I have ever tasted in my life. The potatoes had the consistency of rubber. The goat had the consistency of a cross between leather and steel, I would put it. But we had a wonderful afternoon, laughing and joking with the people as much as we could, because not many people spoke English. We went back and spent the night at the little guest house, and the next day we were crossing the border into Zaire. It was called the Democratic Republic of Congo now. Then it was called Zaire. And it was a very primitive boarding crossing, one tiny little hut in the middle of the jungle. And then you had about a 3-hour walk to get up to the ranger's hut, where at the edge of the national park, to go and see the guerillas. Crossing the border was no great problem, except they said to us, you cannot take money across the border. Now, you need money. They don't accept credit cards, or they certainly did not accept credit cards in those days. So the only way you'd go and see the guerillas is to have cash with you. So one by one, they took us into the guardhouse to search us, pretty thoroughly, all over. But as they were doing that, we were all lined up. We all had our money in our hand. We were passing it behind our backs to each other so that nobody could see it. After I'd been in to be searched, I said to everybody, give me all the money, give me all the money. So it all came to me. I rolled it up in a roll, opened my camera bag. I was carrying quite a large camera bag at the time. And at the top of the camera bag, I had a toilet roll. Hadn't been used very much, so it was pretty intact. I stuffed all the money into the center of the toilet roll, zipped it back up again. And after they'd searched everybody, they came out to search all the baggage. We didn't have much with us because we were only going to be in Zaire for a few days. But when he got to me, he said, "What's that?" I said, "This is my camera bag." He said, "Open the camera bag." So I unzipped the camera bag, took the toilet roll out and said, "Put it underneath the camera bag," and said, "Here, look." So we went in there, lifted out the camera, undid all the zips, searched around, couldn't find anything. I said, "You happy?" He said, "Okay." So I put the toilet roll back into the camera bag, zipped it up again, and we had all our money intact. So we crossed the border, walked about the 3 hours up to the ranger's hut. Beautiful little place, very, very well maintained, immaculate log cabin. And they said to us, "Do you have a booking?" "No, we don't have a booking." And he said, "Never mind, there's not many people around at this stage. You can stay here for the night and we'll take you up tomorrow." The rangers go up and see the gorillas every day, regardless of whether there's people there or not, because they have to know where they are. The gorillas aren't in a zoo, they're wild, they're out in the ranges, in the mountains, and they move nightly from place to place. So the rangers have to have some idea of where they are so that they can take people up there. Before we left, they gave us a bit of a talk about what to do when you get up there, and they said when we come across the gorillas, if they get aggressive at all, you just crouch down, get on the floor, bow down in front of them, do not make eye contact. Do not make eye contact. But they said the gorillas are actually not the most dangerous things up there. They're actually quite safe, provided you do the right thing. He said the most dangerous things are the wild elephants wandering through the jungle, and especially the wild buffalo. So we set out to go and see the gorillas with a guide and a guard. The guide had a big machete, right, and he was hacking his way through the jungle after we got off the main track to get up there. So literally there was no track to get up there. There was a track to get up to the general area, but after that he had to literally machete his way through. And we had a guard with us with a rifle that looked like it had come from the First World War, not the Second World War, the First World War. It would look like an old blunderbuss, maybe one of those ones out of the old westerns that you had to actually barrel load with a pipe or whatever you call it. Very ancient. We're wandering through the jungle, or the reason they told us that they had to take the rifle was because if people go up there by themselves, some of the local villagers are prone to come out and attack them to try and steal whatever they can. So we didn't mind. It was a set price. I think at that time it was about $65 to go up and see the gorillas. People now tell me it's over 1,000, but I'm not sure. I haven't been there for a while. We're getting through the jungle, and next minute the guard with the machete in front stops. And he says, "Down." So we crouch down, and he just parts the leaves. And in front of us there's about 6 gorillas just sitting placidly in the jungle, enjoying themselves. A couple of little babies, big silverback gorilla sitting there. And he let them see us. Right? And one of the things they said is never approach the gorillas. Let them come to you. Right? But so we just crouched down. The gorillas came over to us and they started fossicking around. One of the babies walked behind us. And the silverback saw us and got quite upset about that. So screamed at the top of his voice, came charging towards us, beating his chest. Bang, bow, 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 bow. And everybody dived for the floor and bowed down, and he came running right up, probably within about 2-3 meters of us, and then just stopped. You know, saw that we were actually meaning no harm at all, and so then just looked at us for a moment or two, turned around and went back. Now these gorillas, they're massive. They're only about 5'6" tall, but they're also up to 5'6" around the chest. They're enormous. Their arms make Arnold Schwarzenegger look like a teenager. They would just reach up and grab these massive pieces of bamboo like this and just pull them down and start chewing on them, like incredibly strong. So a couple of the females gorillas came over and started sitting with us. One of them sat beside Brendan, who had a hole in his jeans. And the female took a finger and she was placing it in the hole in his jeans, fiddling around with the hole in his jeans. Poor old Brendan, he could not keep his legs still. It was shaking and shaking and shaking. He was terrified. I mean, how often do you get a wild gorilla poking you with its finger? Fiona was sitting there. One of the females come up and sat beside her. She was the only female in the group. So I don't know whether there was some sort of association or not, but she sat there literally shoulder to shoulder with Fiona, looked at each other in the eye, and, you know, I mean, they were literally, their faces were this far apart. And next minute she got up, just walked across Fiona's legs and wandered off to play with some of the babies, you know. Totally magnificent experience. We were there for, I can't remember, I think they allocate you an hour from memory. I think we were there probably 3/4 of an hour, something like that. They moved off a little bit, we followed them, and once they got to know you, once they got to know that you were there, they were all right. Once they understood that you were not there to do them any harm, they were all right. The reason we had gone into Zaire rather than Rwanda, where Diane Fossey had been to see the gorillas, was because this was about the time of the Rwanda massacre, where 500,000 people, I think it was, from memory, were massacred between the Tutsi and the other tribe. I can't remember what they are. And it was too dangerous to go into Rwanda, so we went into Zaire instead. We went back to the hut, did the 3-hour trek back to the border again, and crossed the border. Crossing the border was pretty uneventful again, except for one little incident. You were not allowed to take photos at the border, but never being one to obey authority too much, I was sort of trying to sneak off a few photos and got caught. So one of the guards came racing over to me, grabbed my camera, opened it up, ripped the roll of film out with half the pictures we had of the gorillas, which was incredibly disappointing. And of course he ripped the film out because in those days there was no digital. It was digital filming, it was all rolls. And then there was no problem. How they expected us, or how they understood that we went up and saw the gorillas, because we were talking about it to them, how they understood that we did that when they'd searched us and found that we had no money, I've got no idea. I guess they must have known somehow that we'd taken it. The chap who searched us originally was a very old chap, looked like he was getting ready for retirement. So I think that a matter of searching it was probably not authoritarianism. I think it was really just a matter of adding to his pension fund. Didn't really matter. He didn't get anything anyway. We went back to Kampala, caught the bus back to Nairobi, and that was the end of our wonderful trip to see the gorillas. Very, very exciting time. I was reading a little while ago, somebody asking some people, is it worth going to see the gorillas? Because when you have to pay $1,000 to go and see them like that, you know, people do question the cost of it, of course. Personally, I would recommend it. If you've got the money, it's a magnificent experience. Just to sit with some enormous wild beast like that, that's just part of nature, where you don't know really know what's going to happen next. Anything could happen. To me, it's a mind-blowing experience. Mind-blowing. So that's today's story. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for listening. Please, if you did enjoy it, subscribe and press like. And if you want to make a comment, please make a comment. And press the reminder bell too, and that way you'll get a reminder of any stories that we have coming in the future. They'll be coming from all over the world. Have a nice day.